Hey there, let's jump into a quick recap of last night's class. So I've got this template here. Excuse me. I'm going to open up the blueprint level just right here. This is for the main thing. And then I'm going to look around and I have nothing, which is great. So we can set this up. So basically if I right click anywhere where there's gray within this grid, then it can bring up all the nodes that you can go. And you can pull down these menus and see just how much they have. And if I click it, then let me zoom in some. Now how do you zoom in? For the mouse with a mouse wheel, you just wheel up and you're going to zoom in, wheel down, you're going to zoom out. For something like the magic mouse, you're going to right click, hold that, and then you're going to go left or right to zoom in or out. And so then it creates a node. You can click it, you can even do copy and paste, just like with a Word document, and delete it easy as pie. You have this context sensitive. That's going to give you more options if you untick it, but it may not be related to what you're working on, hence the name context sensitive. Unreal tries a lot to help you if you're working with something that's graphic related. Then maybe if your context sensitive is ticked on, it's going to give you some graphics related nodes, something that it's trying to predict what you might want to do. But just like our cell phones, predictive text, predictive nodes aren't always 100% accurate. And there are times you might need to tick that off to find the exact thing you're looking for. You can just start to search like play, or you can look up sound. And you only have to do a little bit of it. Sound 2, bring up sound 2D, create 2D sound, play 2D sound, spawn 2D sound. And each of these are different functions. All right, so what I'm going to do first is just pop in custom event. Add a custom event. It's a red node. I can name it whatever I want, like burger. And then there you go. And so if I had a function somewhere else in the game that called a variable when burger is happening, then it would point to this and be connected because it's looking for burger, it finds burger, it does whatever that thing is. If I click off of this, this is an executable wire. And if I let go, then it says, okay, what do you want to do next? For example, I can put print string, and then I can type whatever I want within here, like yummy. Everyone loves burgers, right? If I open this up a little bit more, I can change the text color by going through here and finding something saying I want it to be that color. I can have it be up there for 10 seconds versus 2, and there you go. Now if I compile this and push play, nothing's going to happen because there's no actual input for this function to say, okay, burgers happen, print yummy to the screen. So this won't work for this situation, but in future blueprints where we get a little bit more complex and we have something calling something else, it will work. Let me show you how this can happen and you can control it. If I right click anywhere on the grid and just push the number 1, then it gives you all these things. Now some of these don't apply, but these keyboard events do. We can make it whatever you want to make it, but I'm going to say 1. When 1 is pressed, I want to print the string. I can compile it and push play. And if I push 1, yummy. There you go. And let's say if I release it, print string, and say, oh, whoops, boo. Okay. All right. And for funsies, let's make this red. Why not? A nice red color. That's not a very nice red color. That's better. All right. And this is going to appear for 2 seconds as opposed to the 10. So if I push it, yummy. I'm going to release it now. Boo. So you can see how this works. And you can go through and you can make other things. If you want to have another input, you can put like 4. And then when this is pressed, you can say print string and it can do something else. Let me move this out of the way of the UI for my video capture and say get ye flask. If you guys are strong bad Homestar Runner fans, get ye flask, you will understand the reference. If you don't, it's from Homestar Runner Strong Bad. So get ye flask. So if I push compile and play now, push 1 and I release it, it's going to say boo. If I push 4, get ye flask. So we're starting to see very quickly you can build things. And as I said last night in the class, blueprints and sound cues are kind of a deviant of blueprints. They're not exactly like a blueprint. All these are flowcharts. It's saying do this, do that, do this, do that. Last night I talked a little bit about something called a branch. Let's say there's a custom event where basically it's looking to say, is the player touching the ground? Yes. Then play footstep sounds, which would be over here. And well, you could say play sound at location, and it would play footstep sounds once you populate this in with a footstep sound. And let's say that condition is the player touching the ground is false, then don't do anything. It would just say, oh, if there's nothing there, it does nothing. If there's something there for it to do, it will do it. So a branch for saying, is the player on the ground? Yes, play footstep sounds. Is the player not on the ground? No, do nothing. Would allow you to avoid the buggy behavior of you're jumping and you're hearing footstep sounds when your character's not touching the ground. Okay, cool. Let's move on from that. So that's blueprints. We will get way, way, way more in depth in this, and I'll show you a whole bunch of ways to organize and customize your blueprints to make them do exactly what we want them to do. Alright, so another thing that we talked about last night was a workflow that I do in Logic all the time to save me effort and time when I'm making a whole bunch of sounds. Footsteps are a good example of something you would make. There'll be a lot of them. You don't want just da 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 and have it be too repetitive. So I'm going to go to my sound effects file and I'm just going to look up footstep. I'm just going to pull in whatever. Cool. This doesn't have too many, but it has some. Now this workflow applies to Reaper, applies to Pro Tools, applies to Logic obviously. There's some other DAWs I'll have to look into, but one way that I could go about making this happen is I could go through and select each one, and then I can sit there and just take the time to go and trim all these up manually and then bounce them out and name them, and that's going to take a lot of time. And I showed this to you last night. And it's annoying to have to do this. So there's a much better way to do this. I'm just going to delete all this since it's non-destructive and pull this back. In Logic, I can just do remove silence. I know Pro Tools has this as well. Now you want to look through at your threshold. It's going to say, where should I cut this? If I make this 0, it's not going to cut anything because it's almost like a compressor. It's not looking for where the transient is getting to. If I make it, come on, pull down. -9, it does that pretty well, and so on. Now, you might want, and I hope it's clear, sometimes there's a little bit more tail that's visible, so you can adjust the pre-attack if you need a little more headroom, and I try not to do that too much, but I do leave a decent amount of tail, just if I need to fade things out, if I want some of that ambient sound happening, I don't want anything cut off, and I can click that, and now it's made 7 regions. Now each of these, like I showed last night, is going to be named something a little bit interesting. 3.1 over here, if I go 3.2 and then 3.3 and so on. Those aren't usable names, in my opinion, for working in Engine. So if I select all of these, and I know Reaper does this, you can do a name by track, but I need to change the name. So footstep. Cool. And in fact, I'm going to do footstep _. And now I'm going to name it by track. And now it has all of these names. So if I zoom back out, and if I select each of these and do file export, I'm going to do 7 regions as audio files. I'm going to say that's fine. Now, let me move this out of the way. Hopefully this is not there for you guys. Okay. Now, region name, custom, increment. So this shows footstep _, which was the region name that I had, and then it's going to be increment. This whole thing, I can take that away. I don't necessarily need that. So you can always add other things in if you need, but in my opinion, this is it. I mean, if you added this, that's going to be kind of interesting. I don't feel like that's very useful, so I'm going to take it away. But footstep increment, there you go. I'm going to bounce it. Let's bounce it to a new folder just on the desktop. So I'm going to go here and go to desktop and do new folder and say footsteps new. and I'm going to go ahead and export that out. And it does everything for me super duper fast. So if I go to footsteps, and there they are. I can play each one. And I can pop those into the game. And let's talk about how to pop those into Unreal. It's super duper easy. So I'm just going to make a new one. I've got these 7 right here. I'm going to move this down so that's over here on the screen. This is going to load up. Okay. Got to resize some things so I can see the content browser a little bit more. I don't have my content browser, so I'm just going to go here and make sure it populates there. Cool. Now I could just drag these in here and they'll be right there. But that's a little bit disorganized because I got my blueprints, I got my maps, I got first person overview, and then I have all these things. And first off, this is ginormous. So if I go view options and scale down, because we don't need to be that large. Okay, so first off, each of these have asterisks, meaning they haven't been saved yet. If I were to click save all, it's going to save all these. I can go and toggle what I do and what I don't want to save. There will be situations, particularly when you're working with other teammates, you might have situations where something you don't want to save, something you do want to save. So that's why that's useful. If you tick here, it can toggle all of them. But I don't need to save them just yet. Now what I can do is I can grab each of these with a shift click, and I can right click, and I can move them somewhere. But first, let's make a new folder. Right click, do a new folder, sounds, and I'm just going to grab each of these and move them into here. I can copy them so these would stay there, or I can move them. Let's move them. There they are. Now they're here. Great. And now I can go through and select them all again. If I wanted to, I could make individual cues for each of these. If I open up this one, it's a one-off between this footstep sound and the output. And same for this, and so on. But that's not really what I want to do. So I'm going to select all these and delete them. So if I right click and go delete and say yes, there we go. If I right click this, select them all and say create single queue, then I have one queue. And instead of saying it footstep 07, let's just call it footsteps. Open this up, and what's nice is Unreal automatically randomizes them for you and everything's connected. So if I push play, and so on. Now, if you click on this node, first off, randomize without replacement. If I make that false by ticking it, then it has the option to pick, for example, footstep 7. It can do that once and again, and then go somewhere else. It's basically, for lack of a better phrase, randomize with repeat. Do you hear how it did 4 a couple different times? But if I tick this back on to true, it's going to say whatever played cannot be called again. It has to call something unique and different. Then it can play that sound, the original one, again. Most of the time, we use this. Also, if you open this up, you have weights. You can go through, if I tick this back to false and make this super high, like 10, then the first entry, which is footstep 7, is going to have much higher chance of being called than the other ones. Get the idea. But again, with randomized no repeat, it's still going to prefer footstep 7, but it's going to have to alternate between other ones and not allow back-to-back calls. So weighting is almost better if you do something like this and have this set to false and then weight these as you want. Most of the time I don't worry about this. I leave this on without repeat, and I basically have this all be equal, and you're good to go. The other thing you can do here is we have different randomizations of sounds, but we can put the modulator on, and then we can connect this, and now we have some pitch variance and some volume variance. So as we go through, you have a lot of different cues that you're playing. And one thing I haven't stressed, we haven't talked about voice count yet in this class, but even though you have 7 footstep sounds here, it's only calling one at a time. So it's only using one voice at a time. And we'll get way more into this for future courses or future classes. But a a lot of systems will have a 32 channel max. So you do have to be mindful about, well, how many channels am I using? All right, we're going to change gears just a little bit here. I want to talk one thing about audio sound waves versus sound cues. And the difference here, let me move this out of the way just in case it shows up in the video. I'm not sure if it's going to or not. But all the black things obviously are sound waves. All the blue are sound cues. And if you're looking here, you can see duration for this starter wind 5 is 13 seconds long. The starter wind cue, let's find that. Where is that cue? Actually, don't see it. So let's make one. Create cue. There you are. It says 13. This is 13. That's all great. But if I go into here and I select the sound wave itself, there's this little option to make it looping. Right now it's set to false. It's not ticked. If I turn it on, looping gets added here, and obviously if I play this, it's going to loop. Let me save that real fast and go back to here. This was 13.9, or is 13.9. This was, but now it's 10,000. We'll talk a little bit more about why that matters in future classes when I talk about randomized starting points. I showed a little bit about that last night in the class, but we're not working with that just yet. So, okay, I've got this here. It's looping. This is great. Now if I play it, this is just starter sounds. It's a very static sound. So if I bring this back a little bit and go to enveloper, I'm just right clicking, I put this in here. Now the enveloper will impact volume and pitch. If you think about your automation in any DAW when you're doing your changes and you're bringing it up, bringing it down, this is all this is doing. Now up here is the time, and on the right or left is the value. So right now you see if there's one right here, it says time is 0, value is 1. Now one thing I don't like about the way Unreal works is you can't really tell without really looking at the numbers how far, what the scale is here. If I double click, I get a little bit larger thing, a little bit larger preview. But you can make something, for example, like right here. And that's 0.0000374. Super tiny. And so if I did this, it's probably going to just not even sound, because it does just ever so slightly. But if I were to pull this out like here and I push play, still we're looking at really tiny amounts. So my advice is to grab whatever your first node that you're making, and again, to add it, you just right click, add key. So add your first key, and then you can say this is 13 seconds, I'm going to make this 13 seconds. Now you have this where you can zoom to fit both vertical and horizontal. If you click this, now we've got much better scale. Now we can see what we're working with here. Alright, cool. You can just go through and just add and add to your heart's content. And maybe I don't want to start off super loud, but maybe start about there, and then it's going to play like this. Now, it's not a severe volume change. If I want to make that bigger, I can slope this up and zoom to fit. And now it is a bit more exaggerated. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. There we go. Now I can see it better. Okay, that's doable, but everything is all jagged. So if I click all of these and select all of these keys, these nodes, and if I right click on one of them, I can do auto, and it smooths things out, and it gives you where you can manipulate how much of the slope you want to do some real finesse and real change. And now if you move it around, it's going to have a curve to it instead of just these jagged straight lines. So now if I play it, cool. Now let me go ahead and copy this and paste, and now I want to make a different one. Maybe it starts off quiet and gets much louder and then back down again. Now we're going to talk about this in just a second. And if I go here, it's going to play this one. Now, you probably weren't timing that, but that actually ended before it got to the end because I don't know how well you can see, but it gets into the negative values. So if I make it happen way sooner, about 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds is going to be in the negative. It stops. Now, why is that? Let's go back to this real fast. So, virtualization. If a sound gets to 0, Unreal will just turn it off. It's trying to save assets, save memory, save performance. So it thinks, oh, this sound's turned off, kill the asset, and don't refer to it again. But if you do play when silent, now I can make this go way down to negative, and it will come back, and it keeps playing even though the volume is in the negative. It's going to slope up again. There it is. If you're going to use this and you don't have your sound set to play when silent, then you have to be very careful not to go in the negative. Okay, I'm going to make one more of these. And this one is going to start loud, get soft, grow again, and there you go. All right. Now I'm going to select all 3 of these and do random. Cool. And I'm going to collect the output to here. This is going to be a longer video, but that's okay. And I'm going to do this. Cool. So now it can draw one of these envelopes. Let's push play. Did the middle one. If I play it again, there's the bottom one. I do it again, there's the top one. By the way, it was breaking last night. It was only doing the top one. And I've warned y'all at the first class that something funky happens when I both do a screen capture and a screen share on Zoom and run Unreal all at the same time. It gets kind of weird. So now we have something where it can have one sound, but it's going to have 3 different shapes. It feels different. Cool. Let's add a couple more things to this. Modulation. That's just going to do the pitch and volume randomization just a little bit by default. It's not a great amount. Cool. All right. Now, there's one more thing that's missing. These are all 13 seconds long. If I let this play, this is going to be kind of boring, but here we go for 13 seconds of wind sound. The most exciting thing you've ever heard in your life. Go. We are almost to 10 seconds. And then it stops here in just a second. Now what's boring about that is it doesn't really do anything else. We're just there. It's looping, but it's not calling anything. So we need to add one more. We need to add an actual looping node. Now this is not a looping node for the sound, it's a looping node for the programming, for the nodes. It's going to say, okay, I want you to loop indefinitely all the stuff that's happening before this. If I turn this off of looping, so now this is just a one shot, and I play this. Again, we're going to have to wait for 13 seconds, but as I'm talking, you're going to see it's going to do the shape of this envelope, getting louder and softer. And then when it fades out, it's going to go to the next one. It's going to do its shape. And then when it gets done with that, it'll go to the next one. Maybe the bottom one. No, it picked the top one. So now we're starting to have, with one sound asset, we're starting to have a little more realism of wind gusts coming and going. But we can make it a little bit more organic, because right now everything's lasting about 13 seconds and it immediately calls the next one, which is kind of artificial. So if I add a delay, Now, this delay, you can do a min, max, whatever value. Let's do 2 seconds. So it's not going to, it's not going to be super long in between, but it's going to be long enough that you can tell. The minimum, it might just go one after another, finish and immediately start the next cycle. Or it might wait up to 2 seconds. Let's see what it does. That was pretty close, back to back. It's so exciting listening to wind. Let's see if it picks one that is actually a little bit more pronounced. 2 seconds in between. It's not really picking that. So let's stop this and let's do... I think we have a problem with our code. So remember I talked about in class the syntax matters. The car red, the red car, where you put things. The looping was before the delay, which means it's automatically hitting the loop. Now it's going to wait a second and then say loop. Let's see if this fixes the problem. Again, we have 13 seconds of wind. There it is. It didn't wait that long, but did you see if I put the delay after the looping node, it didn't work the way we wanted it to. So if you get buggy behavior, sometimes you have to go, well, maybe I have these nodes in the wrong order, flip them around, and you're good to go. But you can see the advantage behind this. We could put in this one sound cue, and it could have, we could make as many envelopes as we wanted. I mean, it's just simple as just doing this. And then going and saying, all right, this one's going to be really quiet, and then get horrendously loud at the very end. And I can just add an input, and I can click on this and connect this, and then it will play, and it has 4 options now instead of 3. And each one has a different shape, and you can go through and you can see what this is doing. Alright, so you can see the advantage behind this. And this is really, really nice when you have a limited amount of sounds to work with, but you still, or you have a limited amount of data that you want to work with, you can make things feel a lot more alive and organic with just having some cool setup. I'm going to show you one more thing I did not show in class, and I'm going to make this look super ugly. For those with OCD, this might drive you completely bonkers. I have seen blueprints that look like this, or sound cues that look like this. This is annoying. If I click all this and do Shift W, then it puts them all on the same level, which is really, really nice. For example, if let's pretend that I want all these are different sounds, and I want these all to be the same vertical alignment, then you can do that too. That's Shift A. But you don't necessarily want that because that's still really confusing to read. So I would go back and just put this in order, if I can. And then do Shift W, and it looks a lot nicer. And you can go through, and I kind of like to space mine out to where it makes a lot of sense and it feels a bit more structured and it's easier to read. There you go. Okay, this has been a longer video than I like to do usually, but that's okay. I had some more things I wanted to show. We will get into concatenate and a couple other nodes here. And one thing I forgot to mention in class is please, please, please have some stuff ready to show for next Monday. So I want to hear some sounds that you've been working on. I want to hear some of the music that you're either sourcing and editing and putting into the game, or music that you're writing. I know some are writing original music, which is great. I highly encourage that. I would love to hear and see what you're working on. So I'll see you guys next Monday, and please reach out if you have any questions. Thanks so much.